Welcome Primary 5. We will study now Lesson 1 from Unit 1. This lesson talk about the friction force. But to know the concept of friction force, we can make a simple activity. Try to make this activity. On a high place, when you throw a piece of paper and a coin at the same time, which of them reaches the Earth's surface first? Try to answer. Of course, your answer will be the coin, but try to think about the force causing it. Of course, it is the friction force that occurs when an object moves, and this force is an opposite force affected on the moving object. So, the coin reaches the Earth's surface first, as it affected with a small friction force, but the paper affected with big friction force. We can make another activity by bringing a small rubber ball and let it roll on the sandy floor of the playground and then on the smooth floor of the classroom. So, in which case does the ball move for longer distance and why? Try to understand it. This is a playground. And try to roll on a rubber ball and try to roll on another ball on a smooth surface, like wet cement. We found that the ball moves for a longer distance on a smooth surface, but on a playground it will move for a short distance. This is why Primary 5. This is because the friction force that found between the ball and the playground is bigger than the friction force that found between the rubber ball and wet cement. So the rubber ball moves for a longer distance on wet cement. And this friction force has an effect in the opposite direction of the movement, like this picture. Look at this picture. We found that the direction of the movement forward, but the direction of friction is backward. We can show that on this activity we found the direction of the movement of a ball is forward. This is direction of movement. And we see that the direction of the friction force is on the opposite direction of the movement. So we found that the ball moves for a short distance on the playground and move for a long distance on a smooth surface. This is because, again, the friction force that found between the ball and the playground bigger than the friction force that found between the rubber ball and the wet cement. From this activity, we can conclude that the concept of friction force that says that this is a friction force, it is the force that found between two touching surfaces. We see in this activity the ball touch the playground and has its effect in the opposite direction of the movement, like this graph. We can see another picture to understand the concept of friction force on the opposite figure. Look at this figure, primary 5. This is a picture of bicycle move on a smooth surface like cement. We found that the bicycle move forward. This is direction of movement, move forward, and we found that there are a friction force between the bicycle and the cement in the opposite direction. So we can conclude another definition of the friction force from the last paper. This is said that it is the friction force that slows down the moving of objects. So now we can look at this figure again to understand the meaning of friction force. We found the direction of movement forward and the direction of friction backward. Okay, primary 5. This figure shows that there is a friction force exists between the bike tire and the friction force exists between the bike tire and the ground, and this force tries to slow down the movement of the bike. Note. This note said that and explain the concept of friction force. Of course, we know that a car moves forward. A car moves forward. We found that the car moves forward. Because there is a friction force between the tire and the ground, like this primary 5. This is direction of movement, and this is the direction of friction. And by increasing the speed or even a change of the car direction, the car movement needs friction force. So the friction force controls the car speed. It's a great benefit from the friction force that it is control the car speed, so it protects us from making accident. This means that when the friction force between two touching surfaces is big, the object doesn't move easily. And when it becomes small, the object moves easily. And it's another note that tell us we can walk due to the friction force that found between our shoes and the ground. And without friction, you will slip down. You will slip down and can't walk. So the friction force keeps us from slipping down, and this note said that the friction force between two surfaces is bigger on stopping than moving. And to prove that, or this note, we can make this activity. But to make this activity, we need to bring some materials like a smooth wooden board and some books, a cube of plastic. How can we make this activity? We can bring two books and put them as shown. And put the smooth wooden board on a table. And put a cube of plastic in this position. Put the cube on the top of the sloping wooden board in a way not allowing the cube to slow as this figure at the top of the wooden board. And what's your observation? We can make these steps, but by increasing the number of books. This is a box. We can bring another 3 boxes and put them on a table and put a smooth wooden board on a position that allow the cube start to slide down. This is a book. This is a cube. We found that the cube moves easily in case number 2. This is in case number 1, and this is case 2. We found the cube doesn't move in case number 1, as the cube affected by a big friction force, but in case number 2, the cube move easily as it affected by a less friction force. So the friction force between two surfaces is bigger on stopping than moving. This is cube stop, but this cube moving. Finally, we found that we can read this conclusion to understand this by increasing the slope of wooden board. The friction force between the cube and the wooden board decrease, and by decreasing the slope, the friction force between the cube and the wooden board increase, so the cube doesn't slide down. Finally, we found that the friction force depends on the type of surface. If the surface tough surface, if the surface is rough surface, the friction force increase. We have some examples of rough surface like dry cement, or garden, or sandy floor. If we roll on a rubber ball on a rough surface, we found that the rubber ball will move for a short distance. This is because the friction force increase between the rubber ball and the rough surface. But if we have a smooth surface like glass or wet cement or ceramic, we found that the friction force decrease. We can make this activity again, but by changing the surface and roll on the ball on smooth surface. We found that the ball will move for a long distance. This is because the friction force between the rubber ball and the smooth surface is decreased. And this is examples of smooth surface like between glass and glass, or between rubber ball and wet cement or ceramic. And this picture shows that in case number A, we found that a boy slipping down easily on a snow, this is snow, is example of smooth surface. But in case B, we found that a boy can't slipping down easily on a garden. This is a rough surface. So we can conclude that by changing the surface, the friction force change, and when the object move on a smooth surface, the object will move for a long distance, and when it move on a rough surface, it will move for a short distance. This is because the friction force increase on rough surface and decrease on smooth surface. Thanks primary 5, and at the next period we will study advantages and disadvantages of friction force and ways of decreasing the friction force to overcome these disadvantages. Thanks, see you.